Gavin Newsom shut down this state. Ignoring science, sitting up there at that French Laundry restaurant. By the way, before he was there, I never heard of the French Laundry. I thought it was where you took your tux to get it cleaned. I had no idea. He was there with lobbyists, donors, and the people that drafted the mandates that they were violating by not wearing face masks, by not engaging in social distancing, while telling us to do the same thing. His own kids were enjoying in-person private education while denying in-person schooling for the kids here in government schools in California. It is outrageous. And before the pandemic, the quality of our government schools wasn't nothing to write home about. 80% of the kids educated in government schools in California are black and brown. I only mention that because the left prides itself on caring about black and brown people. Before the pandemic, 75% of black boys could not read at state levels of proficiency. And those levels are low. Math scores even worse. Before the pandemic, half of all third graders could not read at state levels of proficiency. I went to an inner city school called Crenshaw High School. I just checked. 2% of kids at Crenshaw High School before the pandemic, 2% were math proficient. And it's a school dominated by a gang called the Crips. Who sends their kid to a school where only 2% of the kids are math proficient, and it's a school that's dominated by the Crips? If the parents have a choice, and they're going to have a choice when I get up there. The money should follow the child rather than the other way around. On the ballot, there's going to be something for ESAs, that stand for Education Savings Accounts. We spend $15,000 per student per year. Only 18 states spend more, and our scores are near the bottom. And the number one obstacle to preventing a parent from using that money for a charter school, a public school, a private school, or homeschooling is the teachers union. Not teachers, teachers union. Thank you. And they are the number one funder of Gavin Newsom, and they are the most powerful union in the state. Nationwide, 10% of families have their kids in private school, 10%. Nationwide, 6% of black families do. There was a study on where public school teachers send their own school-age kids. 44% Philadelphia public school teachers with school-age kids have their own kids in private school. 39% of Chicago public school teachers with school-age kids have their own kids in private school. LA district where I am, a public school teacher with a school-age kid is at least twice as likely to have his or her own kid in private school compared to a family that does not have a public school teacher in it. That's the equivalent of opening up a restaurant, putting up a sign saying, "Come on in, eat the food." I sure won't. And the ads on Newsom say that I am anti-vax. Not anti-vax. I'm anti-mandates. I'm anti-forcing people. I've been vaccinated because of my age. My doctor says I have underlying comorbidities and strongly suggested I be vaccinated, so I was. But I tell you what, a lot of people listened to Joe Biden and to Kamala Harris when during the campaign they said, if Donald Trump told me to take the vaccine, I'm not going to take it. Well, maybe a lot of people listen to their advice. Other people have already contracted the coronavirus and have developed immunities, which I am told is even stronger than the vaccine. And then other people feel that since the average vaccine takes 5 years, this was done in less than 1 year, it's too soon, it was granted on an emergency basis, and they're suspicious. And then there's this. Congressman, I was at a campaign stop, Palm Desert, went into a coffee shop, young lady waited on me, and I noticed that half the wait staff was wearing a face mask, and half were not. And I said, she wasn't wearing one. And I said, is there a policy? She said, yeah, the policy is our boss lets us to wear a mask if we want, and we don't have to wear one if we don't want. I said, you've been vaccinated? She said, no. I said, may I ask why? She said, you can ask. I don't have to tell you. Isn't that America? And to the extent that when I get there, not if, when I get there, there are still mandates for state workers. If you've not been vaccinated under Gavin Newsom, if you're a state worker, you are tested once a week, and you're required to wear the face mask at work. Now think about that. I thought the whole point behind getting a vaccine is that you're supposedly protected against the vaccine. And if you made a decision not to get the vaccine, you've assumed the risk. So you're telling somebody who's assumed the risk, wear a face mask to protect himself or herself to somebody else who's assumed the risk. It doesn't make any sense. And when I get there, if that mandate is still in force, I'm going to repeal it before I have my first cup of tea. People are leaving California for the first time in our state's 170-year history. And people making between 50 and 100K cite as the first reason for leaving, price of a home. The average home in California just hit $800,000. Depending upon the survey you read, that's almost 250% above the national average. Largely because of the power environmentalist extremists have had in California over this governor and over Sacramento for decades. That's going to turn around when I get there. I'm going to declare a public emergency on housing to unleash the private sector so we can build housing. We're down almost 1 million units. There are hundreds of thousands of units all ready to go, all held up for fear of lawsuits. That's going to change with an executive order on emergency for housing when I get up there. Homelessness up in every major city here in California. When Gavin Newsom ran for mayor in 2004, he said he was going to solve the homeless problem in San Francisco in 10 years. Have you been to San Francisco? It's worse. And when he was lieutenant governor, he sat around complaining he had nothing to do. How about fulfilling your campaign promise to the people of San Francisco and deal with homeless? And it's gotten worse. Depending upon the study you read, we have anywhere from 25% of the nation's homeless to 50%. And it is getting worse. And their attitude is, let's just build housing. Far more expensively than would be the case if the private sector built it, by the way, without dealing with the underlying reason of why people are in the streets in the first place. Some percentage of them, we don't know how many, maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe 15, we don't know. Some percentage of them are schizophrenic. By that I mean of danger to themselves or to others. They need to be removed from the streets for their own safety and for the safety of the homeless population and for the safety of the non-homeless population. It's also a health hazard. And then others are there because they're mentally ill or because they're addicted to substances and they need to be treated. But government doesn't know how to do it. Churches know how to do it. Mosques know how to do it. Synagogues know how to do it. Nonprofits know how to do it. Give them the money, not government, because government always comes with strings attached. But once they are off the streets, they have to go somewhere. And because housing is so expensive, we don't have houses for them. I talked with former Secretary of HUD, Ben Carson, a few days ago. Carson said, Larry, this problem can be solved. We have the money to treat people. We have large areas of federal land in California. The federal government is the largest owner of land in virtually every state, and certainly the largest owner of land in California. And we had already worked out a deal with the Democratic mayor of Los Angeles to use these large parcels of land to build small, low-cost housing at a fraction of the cost, and people, once they're treated, would go there. This problem can be solved. I don't need to tell you that we're running out of water. We haven't added to our water infrastructure system in almost 40, 50 years when the state was half its size. This is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. And contrary to what the ads say, Larry's not a climate change denier. I'm a climate change alarmism denier. Yes, we have extreme weather. When we have wet years, and we have them, we need to store the water to get us through the dry years. And much of the water is draining right into the Pacific Ocean. Ridiculous. And it's not like voters aren't aware of what needs to be done. We pass bond measure after bond measure after bond measure, whether it's for Temperance Flat, whether it's for sites, whether it's to raise Shafta, and they just sit there. When I become governor, I'm going to declare a public emergency on water, and those projects are going to be unleashed. There is a role for desalination. There's a desert country known as Israel. They got a little body of water next to them called the Mediterranean. They are now water self-sufficient to the point where they're selling water. We have a little body of water next to us in California called the Pacific Ocean. We can't figure this out. So cost of living, crime. Crime dramatically up in every major city in California. By crime, I'm just not talking just about thefts. We know that under Proposition 47, you can walk into a store and steal up to $950, and if you get caught, you get a ticket. And since we have cashless bail, if you don't show up to court, there's no downside. Violent crime up. In LA, shootings, homicides up 40–50%. Same thing in Oakland. Speaking of which, a few days ago, former Senator Barbara Boxer got mugged. Her cell phone was taken. A few months before that, a mentally ill homeless guy attacked Gavin Newsom. Had Gavin Newsom not had a security detail with him, who knows what would have happened. How many of us can walk through the city with a security detail? The number one job of government is to protect people and property, and they're not doing it. During the coronavirus pandemic, 20,000 convicted felons released early, many of whom violent offenders. And based upon historical data, the majority of them are likely to reoffend. What could possibly go wrong? 2 soft on crime DAs, one in San Francisco, one is in Oakland. They believe in cashless bail. So you commit a crime, you have a court date, and if you don't show up, no consequences. As a result, crime is going up. And the very people who are hurt are the black and brown and Asian Americans living in the inner city that the left prides itself on caring about. And we're teaching critical race theory, and reparations in our schools, systemic racism. It's done. All this division, slicing people up, dividing people up, black versus white, Hispanics versus Asian Americans, the left does. I've been giving a lot of talk to Hispanic media, black media, trying to convince them that even though I have an R at the end of my name, even though I'm a black guy, it is not fair for the LA Times to call me, as they did a few days ago, the black face of white supremacy. Do I look like a white supremacist to you? I was called the black face of white supremacy. Google it, black face of white supremacy, Larry Elder, and the subheadline was, "You've been warned." So because I believe we should do something about our poor water infrastructure, I'm the black face of white supremacy. Because I believe we should be doing far better forest management, I'm the black face of white supremacy. Because I believe that parents should have a choice in where their kids go to school, I'm the black face of white supremacy. Because I believe that crime doesn't have a color, doesn't have a race, doesn't have an ideology, I'm the black face of white supremacy. You know what that means? It means they're scared I'm gonna win. And I'll tell you, they don't want to hear what I have to say. One of the things that becoming governor of California gives you is something called the bully pulpit. The number one problem facing America, domestic problem facing America, the large number of children who enter the world without a father married to the mother. In 1965, when Lyndon Johnson launched the so-called War on Poverty, 25% of black kids enter the world without a father married to the mother. Now that number is 70%. And Barack Obama once said, a kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 20 times more likely to end up in jail. Now, how do we go from 25% of black kids born outside of wedlock in 65 to 70% now? In 1965, 8% of white kids were born outside of wedlock. Now it is 25%. Now nearly half of all Hispanic kids enter the world without a father married to the mother. Nearly 40% of all American kids today enter the world without a father married to the mother. What we've done with our welfare state is we've incentivized women to marry the government, and we've incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. Where's the conversation? Speaking to a black journalist, and I can tell he wasn't feeling me. Uncle Tom, sellout. Bug-eyed, foot-shuffling Uncle Tom. Boot-licking, bug-eyed, foot-shuffling, boot-licking Uncle Tom. Oreo, as in brown on the outside, white on the inside. Coconut, same concept. The Antichrist. And I can tell he was thinking that name that you really call a black person when you really want to call him Republican. So I said to him, he was challenging me on systemic racism. I said, it's a lie. I said, the police aren't pulling over black people just because they're black. He said, what about George Floyd? I said, no one's saying there aren't individual cases. Come on. Roughly 800,000 police officers. About 1,000 people are killed by the cops every year, out of a population of 350 million. Almost all of those were resisting arrest and resisting violently. The police kill more unarmed white people every year than they kill unarmed blacks. I bet you can't name very many unarmed white people, can you? Because the media doesn't care. And I told him, the studies show, if anything, the police are more hesitant, more reluctant to use deadly force on a black person than a white person. He said, what are you talking about? I said, April 27, 2016, Washington Post, read the article. Studies going back over decades showing cops are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. You're wrong, sir. There's a front page story in July 2016, New York Times. There is a Harvard professor named Roland Fryer. He teaches economics. The man is brilliant. Harvard is the country's oldest university, and he is the youngest tenured professor in the history of Harvard. He's that brilliant. He just knew, because of all these high-profile shootings, whether it's Michael Brown in Ferguson, Freddie Gray died in the police van, Eric Gardner was the one who was surrounded selling Lucy's in New York. He just knew the police were killing black people just because they were black. Did a study. He said it was the most surprising findings of my professional career. Not only were the police not using deadly force against blacks because they're black, they were more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. Sir, you're wrong. And I said, and your being wrong has two real bad consequences. The first is called the Ferguson effect, or the George Floyd effect. I know there's some police officers here. You know what I'm talking about. The majority of what you do is discretionary. You get paid if you want to sit in the car and just respond to radio calls. Or you can get out when you see something that looks suspicious and try to stop something bad before it happens. More and more cops are engaging in passive policing, not proactive policing. The former mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, when he was mayor, said because of this false accusation, the Chicago police, quote, had gone fetal, close quote, meaning fewer traffic stops, fewer arrests, crime goes up. When you reduce the chance of a bad guy being caught, being convicted, and being incarcerated, crime goes up. This is not rocket science. And what happens is the very people that you claim you care about, black and brown people, get hurt. The former New York commissioner, Ray Kelly, said because of this false accusation, only 7% of NYPD cops now say they would recommend the job to a friend or to a family member. This is having adverse consequences. And the other consequence is this. You're a young black man, often from a home without a father. My father told me, when you're stopped by the police, make sure your left hand is at 10 o'clock. Make sure your right hand is at 2 o'clock. Say yes, sir. Say no, sir. Say yes, ma'am. Say no, ma'am. Make sure your paperwork is in order. And if you feel like you've been mistreated, get a badge number and deal with it while we're alive. So many young black, thank you. So many young black men are not complying. And as a result, a regular stop that would have been relatively uneventful now becomes something big. All because of this lie. This is the consequence, I told him, of your lie. He still wouldn't buy it. I said, all right, let's do this. I didn't give up. I said, let's pick up your magic wand, okay? Wave it over America. Remove every smidgen of racism from the hearts of white people. Now, everybody white thinks like Mother Teresa. Do we still have the phenomenon where 70% of black kids enter the world without a father married to the mother? Do we still have the phenomenon where of the nation's annual 15,000 homicides, half of them are black victims, even though blacks are just 13% of the population? Do we still have that phenomenon? Do we still have the phenomenon, I told him, where the #1 cause of preventable death for young white men is accidents, like car accidents or drownings, whereas the #1 cause of preventable death for young black men is homicide, almost always at the hands of another young black man? Do we still have the phenomenon that a young black man is 8 times more likely to be murdered than a young white man? If the answer to that series of questions is yes, I submit to you, sir, that systemic racism is not the problem, and critical race theory and reparations are not the answer. I'm not saying after that rant he became a Reagan Republican, but I can tell the wheels were spinning, and I gave him something to think about. So, we're going to be doing something about the rise of crime. We're going to be doing something about homelessness. We're going to follow the science, and when I get there, if there are any mandates for state workers to be vaccinated or to be tested, those are going to be gone. We're going to give choice in education. We're going to deal with these ridiculous rolling brownouts. We're not going to be forcing our energy companies to spend tens of billions of dollars on weather-dependent, unreliable wind and solar. We're going to release projects that are all ready to go to deal with our water infrastructure so that the water won't be draining off into the Pacific Ocean during wet years. We're going to put sanity back in our school system. We're going to give parents choice. And then I'm going to break for lunch. Let me end with this. Let me end with this, Congressman. You've been very patient. Thank you so much. I had a dream the other night. It was late October 2021, Congressman. World War II vet, we still have him. Kind of hunched over, had a cane, 2 big hearing aids, goes up to a security guard at the Capitol building in Sacramento. And the vet says, "I'd like to speak to Governor Gavin Christopher Newsom." And the guard said, "I'm sorry, sir. Governor Gavin Christopher Newsom is no longer governor. We have a new governor. His name is Larry Elder." Next day, same vet went up to the same guard and said, "Sir, I'd like to speak to Governor Gavin Christopher Newsom." Now the guard's thinking, okay, guy's got 2 hearing aids. He probably can't hear very well. He goes, "Sir, Governor Gavin Christopher Newsom is no longer governor. We have a new governor. His name is Governor Larry Elder." Third day, same vet, same guard. Goes up to the guard and says, "Sir, I'd like to speak to Governor Gavin Christopher Newsom." Now the guard's thinking, okay, the man has probably got Alzheimer's. Maybe he's got dementia. "Sir, Governor Gavin Christopher Newsom is no longer governor. We have a new governor. His name is Governor Larry Elder." The vet said, "Oh, I know. I just love hearing you say it. May God bless you. May God continue to bless the United States of America." Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.